Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from Studio West. Joined this morning by Peter Baker, longtime principal White House correspondent for the New York Times. Good morning, Peter. You didn't have to put on a tie. I'm glad you did, but you didn't have to put on a tie.
For you, Hugh, always. How you doing this morning?
Well, I'm glad to see you. Peter, I want to talk about GarageGate, and I want to start with the obvious question. Do you have any idea what the precipitating event was for the search of the Penn Biden Center?
No, and I think it's one of the real interesting questions here, right? This is 3 years after President Biden left the Penn Biden Center to announce his candidacy for presidency, 2 years after he won the presidency. So what were they doing packing up at that point? And they haven't really given us any kind of answers about that. Who was doing the search exactly, why they were doing it, what precipitated it. And it's one of those questions that seems like it's pretty straightforward, and they ought to be able to answer without compromising an investigation. They don't want to respond to a lot of questions because they want to compromise an investigation. I think people can understand that, but that's a pretty basic question that doesn't seem, that hard to answer, and they haven't done it.
Another basic question that I have not heard asked, but I don't listen to every minute of every White House briefing. Has the president's representative at the podium, whether it's Karine or the admiral, been asked if the president has received a grand jury subpoena in connection with the Hunter Biden grand jury, which might have precipitated this search?
Oh, that's interesting. We have asked repeatedly whether he would agree to talk to the special counsel in this investigation. We had not. I don't think I've heard it connected to the Hunter Biden investigation. But I could see why people would ask the question, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know if it has or not, but if a subpoena still could take him came from the grand jury to the former vice president about documents, that would launch this. It would explain, and this is what really interests me. Do you find it unusual that lawyers were sent to pack up the boxes at the Penn Biden Center?
It does sound a little odd, right? In other words, not clerks, not low-level aides, but lawyers. And the idea of packing up, like, okay, for what purpose exactly? They make it out as if it was just routine, fine, but they haven't backed it up with any kind of further elaboration.
Another question, I don't know if it's been asked and answered yet. The Bidens had 3 homes after the vice presidency, one in Wilmington, one in Rehoboth, and a rental in McLean, which I am told now that they vacated. Has anyone asked if all of the McLean house went to either Wilmington or Rehoboth, or is there a storage facility for material? Because that was a big house. I've seen that house. That was a big house. There was a lot of stuff in it, and you have moved enough times back and forth around the world. You know what happens. Stuff goes into storage facilities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's been no word of a storage facility. What we were told is the material from the McLean house went to the other residences. But, they haven't definitively ruled that out either. That's an important question to ask.
All right. And next, you've covered a lot of special counsels and independent counsels. They're different, but they're the same. Mm-hmm. The world land speed record for a special counsel, at that time called an independent counsel, is Jacob Stein. He served 6 months. He was appointed to investigate Ed Meese before he became Attorney General Ed Meese, and he wrapped it up in a hurry. And I was the law clerk to the special panel of judges who appointed him. 6 months is the fastest they get done. Does this mean that we have at least 6 months of Robert Hur investigation and Q&A with the press and camped outside of his house like they were for Mueller?
Yeah, I would suspect at least 6 months. You're right. I mean, it hasn't gotten any quicker since the 1980s. I think that the natural forces of physics in Washington is to extend, not to shorten these investigations, because you always want to make sure you've chased down every possible lead. The desire on the part of a special counsel to make sure they haven't forgotten something, left a rock unturned, is pretty powerful. There's not an incentive to be faster, honestly, because that's not the way they're set up. You're right. It's not an independent counsel. Independent counsel had more autonomy. That's one of the reasons why both parties ultimately got rid of it, because they thought Lawrence Walsh and Ken Starr on Iran-Contra and Whitewater went too far, needed some limits, and didn't. They want these special counsels to have limits, and there are limits in the sense that Merrick Garland, as the Attorney General, does supervise these special counsels. But you're right. I think the natural forces of physics in Washington is to extend, not to shorten them.
Now, the worst thing about special counsels is that they automatically oblige people to lawyer up, and lawyers are expensive. If you go get Abby Lowell or Stan Brand or any of that half dozen of people who know how to do one of these things, and it's a specialty, your legal bills are going to go up to 6 figures in a hurry, and maybe 7 figures. Has anyone asked any member of the White House staff if they've lawyered up in response to this?
I have not heard of anybody yet employing a lawyer, but as you say, they have already questioned a few witnesses even before the appointment of the special counsel. We don't know who those are, all of them at least. I think one of them was a young woman named Katie Chung, who was executive assistant to the vice president and was, thought to be involved, I suppose, in the packing of the documents. And I have not heard of any of them having a lawyer at this point.
What was your reaction to the Bureau and the DOJ declining to assist the president's lawyers in doing additional searches at the president's house?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'd like to know more about that, and I haven't talked to the DOJ myself on it. I think that they obviously want to keep a certain cautious distance, my guess is. That's the implication anyway from the article in the Wall Street Journal, that they did not want, they wanted to be able to, maintain their prosecutorial detachment in effect. It's questionable or interesting because, had they been there, obviously they would have seen circumstances under which documents were found to understand the origin of that rather than simply having to take testimony. But they didn't do that in the Mar-a-Lago case either. Until they had executed the search warrant, they were relying on former President Trump's lawyers to do the search for them. They did not participate themselves until they decided that he wasn't fully cooperating. And it may be that they decided that in this case it wasn't necessary because the President Biden's lawyers had gotten in touch with the archives after they found the first batch.
So now we come around to the key question, Peter, the lawyer's question. How does a lawyer at the Department of Justice know that President Trump's lawyers are not cooperating, but President Biden's lawyers are, except on the testimony of said lawyers?
Well, I think in the Trump case, and again, I'm not an expert on law, you are, but I think in the Trump case, they had asked for documents that they were told they were not getting. And there's some indication that there was some testimony that they have from witnesses telling them that there were documents there that had been withheld from the authorities when they came to get them. I don't believe that there is any such testimony, at least what we know of at this point in the Biden case. And we should always caution that there's a lot we don't know, and things can change, facts can change, and that would change our understanding of the events. But I believe that they had, remember, there was talk about a security camera, there was talk about witnesses talking to the authorities in the Mar-a-Lago case. So they may have had more factual predicate for believing that there was lack of cooperation there than we've seen so far, at least in the Biden case.
Have you eyeballed the Penn Biden Center yet and considered whether or not it is, to your eye, a seasoned reporter, more secure than Mar-a-Lago, Rehoboth, or Wilmington? Because those three facilities have got Secret Service. Penn Biden Center, I think, is an office suite. Have you eyeballed it?
It's an office. I have not, no. And it is not, you're right, it's an office suite. And while he was former vice president, I don't believe he had protection, at least for the whole time. My memory is, and I don't know this to be the case, so don't hold me to it, but my memory is a former vice president will have Secret Service protection for a certain short amount of time after leaving office, but not in perpetuity anymore. So it probably was not, as you rightly say, protected by Secret Service. It was an office as opposed to Mar-a-Lago, which was a club with members that were coming in and out. I don't know that anybody going in and out of Mar-a-Lago knew to look for documents until this became a story, obviously. So we don't have any indication anybody did anything there to look for documents. But Penn Biden office, it was a private office. I don't know how many people were coming in and out of it all the time. Again, it was used as a launching pad for him for his next political campaign. They moved in right at the beginning of 2018. Beginning of 2019, he officially severed his ties with that so as to begin his campaign. There's so many questions here we don't know. Why were these documents there? What were they going to be used for? What was their level of classification? We keep pushing the White House to answer some of these questions. Some of them may be helpful to them if they were to give us the answers, and some of them may be incriminating. We don't know, but it would help if we got the answers.
Now, you recall during the Trump investigations, Emmett Till, Flood, a whole bunch of lawyers talked to the media. Has President Biden's private counsel talked to you yet, Peter?
Well, they have a spokesperson for the White House counsel who has given, he's talking to reporters and gave a conference call earlier this week, as a matter of fact. The private lawyers, I do not believe, have made any public comments other than the statements. There may be reporters who have spoken to them, but the White House counsel has been putting out public statements and giving at least one conference call and otherwise calling reporters. The problem for the White House is at this point is that because there are so few answers that they're providing, that these briefings or interactions with reporters haven't satisfied basically any of them, and they haven't answered why they gave misinformation when they first put it out in the first place. Remember, they put out the original statement on Monday of last week saying, yes, there were some documents. It was confirming a media report. They didn't volunteer this. There were documents found on November 2nd. They knew at that time there had been a second batch found on December 20th, but didn't say anything. And later they tried to explain to us that the reason why they didn't want to talk about this for 2 months after the original discovery is they didn't want to put out information piecemeal. But that's exactly what they ended up doing. 3 days after that statement, they put out another statement confirming in response to another media report, not voluntarily, that the second document batch had been found. So they keep getting tripped up like this, and I think Corinne Jean-Pierre at the podium has gotten tripped up a couple times on this, which hasn't helped. And I think that they have tried to do what Clinton and other administrations have done, which is to separate the communications on this from the main press secretary's office and silo it with the counsel's office. But it has produced right now at this point these televised briefings that have gone pretty badly, I think.
I'll tell you, Peter, you didn't use the term. It's my term. It's a cover-up because they won't answer questions, and when questions aren't being answered, it's a cover-up. Good luck in getting to the bottom of the precipitating event, because that's the key to me. Why did they start emptying the Penn Biden Center? Peter Baker of the New York Times, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.